I'm Jenny Fern, and welcome to my library. I'm a chaotic neutral mechanical engineer who's really into permaculture and wants to talk about books. So let's talk about books. Today, we are talking about the books that I wish I had read in the year between graduating high school and heading off to college. I've talked about this before, but I was not great at finishing reading books when I was in high school. And when I was bridging between high school and college, I had like an extra long summer, and that was the year that I decided, I'm gonna try to read. And I did. I read some stuff. I didn't finish some stuff. But these are the books that I would recommend myself to read if I were in that position now. If you're in that position, these are the books that I'd recommend to you. I only have 5. So it's not like a burden. Several of these books were not even published when I was in that situation. So the first book that I would recommend is The Phantom Tollbooth by Norton. This is a classic children's novel. For Milo, everything's a bore. When a toll booth mysteriously appears in his room, he drives through only because he's got nothing better to do. But on the other side, things seem different. Milo visits the Island of Conclusions. You get there by jumping. Learns about time from a ticking watchdog named Talk, and even embarks on a quest to rescue Rhyme and Reason. Somewhere along the way, Milo realizes something astonishing. Life is far from dull. In fact, it's exciting beyond his wildest dreams. So I think this is an excellent book to read when you're in that period before going to college, because it'll help you get back in touch with like your inner child. I know at the time when you're graduating, you're kind of ready to be rid of like your K through 12 life, but it's also a really nice time to reflect on, having been a child and maybe read something that you didn't when you were a kid. You can still enjoy childish things, and there's more to life than acting like an adult. I also think it'll be good because it does reflect on like the school system and exiting that K through 12 schooling, that education, and either honestly going out into the world or heading into college. This will be like a nice little reflection or a bookend to that education experience, even though you are going into furthering your education. I also just love this book. I think it's so comforting and fun and imaginative. If you feel like you missed out on that a little bit in your last 4 years of high school, that you maybe were taking things a little too seriously, then I'd recommend this to start off the summer, be a kid again, and reflect on school. The next book that I recommend is A Psalm for the Wild-Built by Becky Chambers. This is a nice short book that will also not feel burdensome in any way. If you feel absolutely drained from finals, from doing the whole gambit of trying to get into college. It's been centuries since the robots of Panja gained self-awareness and laid down their tools. Centuries since they wandered, en masse, into the wilderness, never to be seen again. Centuries since they faded into myth and urban legend. One day, the life of a T-monk is upended by the arrival of a robot, there to honor the old promise of checking in. The robot has one question: what do people need? But the answer to that question depends on who you ask and how. They're going to need to ask it a lot. So this is a very comforting and reflective book. We follow this T-monk who is going through a bit of a crisis in identity, in what they want to do for their life. And I feel like a lot of people who have either gone to college undecided or have selected a major and maybe are rethinking what they've chosen for the rest of their lives will find some comfort in being able to rethink those decisions and to also value your self-worth outside of the career you choose. So it'll help you ascribe value not to like what you do, but more in who you are, who you want to be. I thought it was really nice and reflective even at the age that I read this. I do also really love the robot character in this. I think it's a very cute, very comforting little robot. So the next book that I have to recommend is Einstein's Dreams by Alan Lightman. This is also a very short work, and it's very experimental. It is 1905 in Bern, Switzerland. A young patent clerk has been dreaming marvelous dreams about the nature of time. He is Albert Einstein and has almost finished his special theory of relativity. What were his dreams like those last pivotal months? Here, in this extraordinary and highly acclaimed work by physicist Alan Lightman, 30 fables conjure up as many theoretical realms of time, dreamt in as many nights. In one world, time is circular, its people fated to repeat triumph and trial over and over again. In another, men and women try to capture time, which appears as a nightingale in a bell jar. In yet another, there is no time, only frozen moments. All are visions that gently probe the essence of time, the adventure of creativity, the glory of possibility, and the beauty of Einstein's dreams. When I first read this book, it was such comforting and thought-provoking work. We are exploring so many different conceptions of what time can be and really exploring through thought experiments how different worlds could look. Because I went to college for mechanical engineering, I did have to take a physics class that goes into special relativity. It was a little bit of a struggle for me, if I'm being completely honest. It was difficult to grasp, but you don't have to have that background. You don't have to be going into a physics or math or engineering related degree in order to enjoy this book. Really, I think so much of why I'd recommend this to you at this time is because it really highlights this wonderful academic sense, this ambiance of being very thoughtful, of enveloping your whole world into your academic work, and really being rigorously studious and thoughtful. So my next book is Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi, and I read this quite late in life. I read this, I think, last year, and perhaps my reason for selecting this book is a little bit more personal to me. But before we get into that, I'll read the description of this work. In a profound work that pivots from the biggest questions about American history and ideals to the most intimate concerns of a father for his son, Ta-Nehisi Coates offers a powerful new framework for understanding our nation's history and current crisis. Americans have built an empire on the idea of race, a falsehood that damages us all, but falls most heavily on the bodies of Black women and men. Bodies exploited through slavery and segregation, and today, threatened, locked up, and murdered out of all proportion. What is it like to inhabit a Black body and find a way to live within it? And how can we all honestly reckon with this fraught history and free ourselves from its burden? Between the World and Me is Ta-Nehisi Coates' attempt to answer these questions in a letter to his adolescent son. Coates shares the story of his awakening to the truth about his place in the world through a series of revelatory experiences from Howard University to Civil War battlefields, from the south side of Chicago to Paris, from his childhood home to the living rooms of mothers whose children's lives were taken as American plunder. Beautifully woven from personal narrative, reimagined history, and fresh, emotionally charged reportage, Between the World and Me clearly illuminates the past, bracingly confronts our present, and offers a transcendent vision for a way forward. Despite how painful the subject matter is, the writing is so So beautiful. Like one of the best things that I read last year. So the reason why I say this is a bit personal to me and maybe a recommendation more from my current self to my past self is because I was very ignorant when I first went into college. I had so little exposure to really the other people's ways of thinking and other people in general. And I think reading this would have helped me to understand a little bit more before I went out into like an entirely new town. Like when you go into college, you leave your hometown, you're somewhere else with completely new people. At least for me, I felt like I was floundering for a little bit, understanding the new people who were around me and the new environment, and also being challenged constantly on how I thought. Regardless of whatever you're studying in college, you usually do have to take a sociology class, which is great, and I think actually is very important. Having been a mechanical engineering major, so much of my coursework was taken up by the math background, the physics background, and then all of the engineering coursework. But in order to be a more well-rounded person, you really do need exposure to different types of studies. So I recommend this as a precursor to that. I do think younger people have a much better exposure to all sorts of different subjects, and there is so much more available through the internet than what I got, which was like all of my friends on Facebook, and then like playing dress-up games where I put like outfits on little dolls. I think younger people are much more equipped to go out into college and into the world with some understanding of other people and race and stuff like that, in America at least. My last book to recommend is Rental Person Who Does Nothing by Shoji Morimoto. This is a bit of a strange book, and it's also very short, very like internet-y. Like it's based on a Twitter. Shoji Morimoto was constantly being told by his boss, "It makes no difference whether you're here or not," and that his presence contributed nothing to the company. Morimoto began to wonder whether a person who does nothing could still have actual value and a place in the world. Perhaps he could turn doing nothing into a service. With one tweet, Rental Person was born. Rental Person provides a fascinating service to the lonely and socially anxious. This book details some of his thousands of true life adventures, from accompanying a divorcee client to her favorite restaurant, to waving goodbye to a client from a train platform. Rental Person is dependable, non-judgmental, and committed to remaining a stranger. And the curious encounters he shares are revelatory about both Japanese society and human psychology. In Rental Person Who Does Nothing, Morimoto chronicles his extraordinary experiences in his unique line of work and reflects on how we consider relationships, jobs, and family in our search for purpose in life. So, kind of similarly to why I recommended A Psalm for the Wild Belt, I also recommend this because it has to do with finding yourself and understanding the value that you bring to this world inherently. I think this is important for students who have been working their entire childhoods in order to get into college, or at least working very diligently in their high school years to put up a good application. When I was in middle school, I don't know why I had this in my head, but it was my mission to get straight A's for the entire time. And I did that. Did I need to do that? No. But I did. So I understand putting a lot of your worth into how people are grading you and what value you are being ascribed by an outside figure. So this book helps to break that down, take it to the extremes. Like, say you offered nothing, you did nothing. Would you still be valuable? And that's the question that this book asks. I think that's important to think about before you get into the working world. So these are the books that I would have recommended to myself and that I'm currently recommending to any of you who are in that situation. Also, if they just resonate with you because of something you're going through. So I'd love to hear if any of you are in this situation, like hello and good luck. I'd love to hear if any of you have recommendations for people who are in this situation. What books do you think they need to be reading? You can also be reading anything and everything that you love. That I don't think you can ever go wrong with that approach. If you enjoyed this, please consider sharing it with a friend who you think would also enjoy it. Consider liking and subscribing, and I will be back again soon.